Because I used to think the 12 steps were like a checkbox. I do all 12 and I wash my hands and I'm done until I heard a guy say, none of those 12 steps are singular events. Work on all those steps all the time. It's a blueprint for a better way of life. It gave me insight into my alcoholism, and it sure as heck put my hand in God's hand.
I heard it through the grapevine.
Welcome. It's the AA Grapevine Half Hour Variety Hour featuring the collective voices of Alcoholics Anonymous. I am Olis, an alcoholic in Oakland, California.
Hey, Alice. Hey, everybody. I'm Sam, an alcoholic in Palm Springs, California.
Hey, Sam. How are you?
I haven't seen you in a month of Sundays. Where you been?
It's like forever. Since the last time I saw you, I've been to my friends in Rhode Island put on an incredible convention in Newport, Rhode Island, which I'd never been to. It's beautiful. And then I did a film festival in LA. I mean, life's good.
You're bi-coastal. You're just like hitting it all.
I mean, maybe this is it. Maybe this is the only shot we get. Let's do it all.
I had a sponsee many years ago. He wanted to know, what does pack into the stream of life mean?
For people who don't know, on page 86 of the book of Alcoholics Anonymous, in the 10 nightly review questions, the question before is like, was I selfish or did I pack as much as I could into the stream of life? And I love that question. Did I get in as much as I could?
Because that's one of the reasons that I stopped drinking. I wanted to live.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to just exist. Just getting through the day, that's not good enough. I mean, sometimes all you can do is just get through the day. I mean, let's be real.
Yeah.
But I want to have a big life. I want to pack as much into life as I can.
Yeah. I've come to believe that the most valuable asset that I'll ever have, that any of us will ever have, is time. What did I do with my time? So I write down things like, I got the laundry done, I made groceries, I prepped food. So it's not just the things that I did that people might think, oh, that's interesting. Like, how did I live the day?
Yeah, it's not the highlight reel. It's all of it.
All of it counts.
There's something that I encountered recently that made me want to throw this question out to the listeners. To call or write in with sayings you've initially misheard in meetings and or other cool or weird sayings that you've heard in meetings. I can't repeat the one that I heard because as we alcoholics are, sometimes we tend to be a little spicy at moments. And I'm not going to say that one on the podcast, but there are some really good ones out there. We'd love to hear what you've heard that made you laugh, especially if it's something that you misheard and then you found out later it was like wholly something different. I think those are called mondegreens.
Mondegreens. I didn't know there was a word for it. This comes up most commonly in music, that you have a song and you love the song and you've been singing the song for years. And then you find out that's not what the song says. It says something different. And that happens at all parts of our life. But we would love to hear from you about anything that you've misheard in a meeting, particularly if you were convinced that you heard it correctly and later on you find out that you misheard it. What's it called again?
It's a mondegrin. I've got this for you because it comes from a song.
Okay.
I think it was either an English or an Irish song, but the lyric is laid him on the green, but people misheard it as Lady Mondegreen.
Of course we heard it as Lady Mondegreen. Ireland, and there should be a Lady Mondegreen.
And that's the origin of that term. But yeah, exactly. It's from misheard lyrics.
Yeah.
But yeah, folks, now we'd love for you to call and leave us a voicemail or send us a recording from your phone telling us about it. But if you don't want to do that, type it up and send it to us. You can find all the contact information at aagrapevine.org/podcast.
Okay, I have an important question for you, Sam, a question that I know that you're not prepared for.
It's 42. It's always 42. The answer to life, the universe, and everything is 42.
I don't know what you're talking about, sir.
I know, but I'm a nerd. And other nerds out there know exactly what I just said.
Okay, well then tell me, because we want the non-nerds want to know.
I'm going to challenge you to look that one up for yourself. Use AI. That'll make it going to be so many layers of nerdiness. If you use AI to find that out, it'd be great.
All
Well,
right,
what's
Sam.
your real question,
Come on,
Alice?
Sam. You ready? Who's our guest today?
Oh, that one I totally got that. Today we welcome Chris S. from Gardner, Massachusetts. But
First, the news. Told you they'd made us corny.
the Military Veteran Interview Project was recently announced. It invites AA members who are veterans of the United States or Canadian Armed Forces to participate in a unique opportunity to share their experiences. There will be several audio interviews in which anonymity protected AA members who are military veterans share their experience, strength, and hope, focusing on the intersection of military service and recovery in AA. They are seeking representation from a broad spectrum of veterans across all branches of the armed services in Canada and the U.S. They aim to include voices from a diverse range of backgrounds, ranks, ages, genders, orientations, and operational experiences. Each story will illustrate the journey of recovery and sobriety during or after military service. If you are an AA member and would like to learn more about this project or volunteer for an interview, please email militaryoutreach@aa.org. The anonymity of all participants will be rigorously protected. To hear audio interviews of active duty AA members, go to aa.org/military. What are the Grapevine's most popular books? Emotional Sobriety 1 and 2. Both are filled with experiences by sober AA members, many with long-term sobriety, about the positive transformations we can achieve by practicing the principles of the program in all aspects of our lives. The stories show how the rewards are serenity, emotional balance, and an increased joy for living. Visit aagrapevine.org/books.
My name's Chris. I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is November 29th, 2023. I have a sponsor today. I have a home group today, which is the All Are Welcome group in Gardner, Massachusetts. We meet every Saturday morning from 11 to 12 p.m. I go on commitments very regularly whenever I'm asked. I have done the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I work on a relationship with a higher power every single day.
Oh, it's fantastic, Chris. What was going on that made you consider doing Alcoholics Anonymous?
There are alcoholics on both sides of the family. So I had seen, throughout my childhood, what alcohol could do to, family dynamics and just people in general. But I was one of those people that said, it'll never be me. If I ever wanted to stop, I would be able to stop. I picked up a drink a little bit later in life than sometimes I hear people in the rooms of AA, like right before college, late high school, college. And I remember the first time I ever took a sip of alcohol, I didn't like it. But the first time I felt the effect, I fell in love.
Mm.
Bill W. talks about it as the elixir of life. But I didn't know at that time I was going to chase that feeling for about 20 years. And
Mm.
that's what I did. I lost relationships. I had DUIs, loss of careers, jobs. I mean, so many things were going wrong in my life. And, I had known that alcoholism was a potential because of the genetic thing. But, I always loved the line, genetics kind of loads the gun, but it's the environment that pulls the trigger.
Yeah.
I put myself in the environment and, I let this disease flourish. At about 24 years old, when I had already had a lot of suffering, my family has a friend that's an addiction specialist. And I met with him and he said to me, Chris, he said, an alcoholic of your type said, the only thing that I've seen work consistently, and he's got 50 something years in the drug and alcohol addiction field, he said, is Alcoholics Anonymous. And, I took that to heart. It took me a while to get to my first AA meeting, but I did. I walked in at 24 years old. I was scared. I didn't realize at meetings that people raised their hand and said, hi, I'm Chris, I'm an alcoholic. And there I am sweating as the meeting's going around. But for the first time in my life, I was willing to raise my hand and say, hi, I'm Chris, I'm an alcoholic. But what I didn't know in that moment was I would say it for the first time, but I didn't accept it in my heart and soul. And I did that for a long time. I would go to meetings, I would say I was an alcoholic, but I didn't really understand this disease of alcoholism. I always believed that it was in the bottle for me, and if I could push that bottle away, that my life would get better. And I think that's been the big lie for me. And I've needed AA to be able to teach me that the big lie for me is when I push alcohol aside, I think I'm okay as long as I'm not drinking. And what I missed when I first came around the rooms of AA is I didn't understand that alcoholism is in my thoughts. Alcoholism is how I act and behave. Alcoholism is in my attitudes towards myself, others, life in general. And so I always went back to alcohol. And when I first went to the rooms of AA and people told me, they said, listen, Chris, if you are an alcoholic, things are going to get worse. It's a progressive and fatal disease. I didn't want to hear that. You couldn't convince me that it was a disease at that point. You couldn't convince me it was going to get any worse. I was 24 years old. They told me jails, institutions, and death, and I didn't want to believe any of it. Long story short, it's like the people in the rooms of AA had a crystal ball and they knew exactly what was going to happen to my life well before I knew what was going to happen and well before I experienced it. I was defeated. I was defeated when I finally got to the rooms to like really give this a shot and get the sponsor and work on the steps and join home groups and do commitments and work on a relationship with a higher power. Because when I was in treatment, that's when I sat there and finally read the doctor's opinion. And that's where I finally understood that this thing was a body, mind, and spirit malady. And I was going to have to work on all three of those parts to start to get a little bit better. And finally, I did that. And in all reality, AA has done for me slowly what alcohol did for me quickly. I had to be
Mm.
patient. I had to put in the labor. And I had to work on a relationship with a higher power. But, alcohol's the great taker. It took a lot of the material things, but what really got me, as desperate as the dying can be, is alcohol took my dignity. It took my self-respect. It took my morals. It took my ethics. I was a shell of myself when I walked in that meeting room after leaving treatment center, bawling my eyes out. And for the first time ever, in a meeting room, I raised my hand and I said, hi, I'm Chris, I'm an alcoholic. And then I said the hardest three words, I need help. And
Yeah,
ever
wow.
since then, little by little, my life has gotten better. And, I'm a better person today than when I first walked in Alcoholics Anonymous. They told me you're either growing or you're going in this program. So I
Mm.
always look for ways to grow.
Yeah. You've said so many things. It's not in the bottle, it's in me. The problem's in me. But it's clear when I listen to you, you're a guy that believes in putting your hand out for other people. Can you talk about how you got introduced to service and what kind of service you're doing?
I probably dabbled in Alcoholics Anonymous for a little over a decade before I started showing up at treatment centers and things like that. And when I say showing up at treatment centers, I mean as a patient, not doing service yet.
Right.
But I knew intuitively a little bit is every time I left the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, I felt a little bit better. Even though I was that person like in the back of the room, in the Northeast, we call it denial aisle. I'm in the back, I'm on my cell phone. I'm thinking about everything other than Alcoholics Anonymous. But at the end of the day, I knew that something was happening in those rooms because I could see it in the flesh. I knew people were staying clean and sober. And they were talking about doing service and they were talking about sponsoring people and speaking at commitments and working on the steps. And they were talking about how Alcoholics Anonymous impacted not only their life when they're in the rooms of AA, but little by little, Alcoholics Anonymous started reaching out and touching all aspects of their life. And I wanted that. I wanted, not just to not drink. I wanted to be able to just be a better person and, grow as an individual. Somebody in a meeting room one day, I was sitting there and this lady spoke up and she said, sometimes some of us walk into Alcoholics Anonymous, we think we're big shots, and we slowly work our way up to servants. That hit me like a ton of bricks. And I was like, man. And then I would hear people say, Chris, if you want to keep your recovery, you need to give this thing away and you need to pass a message along. And so that began my journey of like, well, how can I do that? And I started with, weeks of sobriety, very minimal sobriety. I just was shaking people's hands. I was asking them how they were doing. I was getting, outside of myself, and that's something that I just wasn't accustomed to. I would give people rides to meetings, just that's where I started. And then I got a sponsor right away, and he asked me to go with him on commitments. And we'd go to detoxes and treatment centers. And I couldn't speak yet at the time. In the Northeast, it's typically 90 days before, we allow people to be able to speak and share their experience, strength, and hope. But I got in the car with him. We would talk about Alcoholics Anonymous and recovery and life on the way to the commitment. We'd talk on the way back, the age old, like meeting before the meeting, meeting after the meeting, and I just felt better. Even though I didn't say a word, I knew that it was a good reminder for me. If I pick up alcohol, I can be right back in treatment. And it was good for me to show, people that were in treatment that, like, hey, this is possible, like I'm not too far removed from your seat and I'm here. And that made me feel good. And then I started getting the opportunity to be able to speak and share a message of experience, strength, and hope. And one day I did a commitment with this gentleman, and I drove him to the meeting, and he gets in my car and he sits next to me and he looks over at me and he goes, Chris, he goes, I feel so grateful right now. I feel better than a drink could ever make me feel. And that really hit me like, man, I got to keep doing this and I've got to do more of this. And, they told me when I first came to Alcoholics Anonymous, a grateful heart will never drink.
Mhm.
And that, gratitude has been such a bedrock of my recovery. And I get so much gratitude for Alcoholics Anonymous and my own sobriety and recovery when I'm being of service and helping people, in the field. Go up to the newcomer. I try to make people feel welcome. My current sponsor, he made me feel welcome. When I went to that meeting room for the first time, he made me feel like that was a room worth going back to. He didn't try to knock me down. He didn't try to be aggressive with me in any way, shape, or form. He handed me a coin, and on the coin it said, "There are no strangers here, only friends we haven't met yet."
Wow.
I love that.
I speak at a lot of commitments. I'm a former college professor, so I really enjoy speaking and I'm comfortable doing that. So I try to do as many commitments. I also work in the drug and alcohol field as well now. And they told me, like, never say no. Somebody asks you to do a commitment, unless you have a real good excuse, make sure that you do it. And I try to do that today.
Yeah.
You said that you got a sponsor early on. That sponsor started you working the steps too. Is that correct?
100%. Yeah.
The whole purpose of the steps is to find the solution that is a relationship with a power greater than myself that can help me live. Can you talk about your experience of working the steps and how that worked for you? Were there difficulties?
Yeah, I was the guy that came into Alcoholics Anonymous. I would hear people say meeting makers make it. And I took that as, okay, all I need to do is just get in the seat, go to meetings, don't drink, and I will get better. For me, in my journey, that was certainly not the case. The don't drink and go to meetings program just didn't work for me. I certainly needed something deeper. And I fell in love with the fellowship before I fell in love with the 12 steps. But there was a guy who came up to me in the meeting one time and he said, Chris, you're part of a spiritual 12-step program and you're not interested in the spirituality or the 12 steps. So why do you think you keep picking up a drink? And he got me, right? He like put me into a corner. And then he said to me, I'm going to ask you four questions. When you're not drinking, do you experience the restlessness, irritability, discontent that we talk about in these halls? And he said, I'll even simplify it more for you. Are you uncomfortable, uneasy in your skin, easily annoyed, and never satisfied? Yup, 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 no problem. Then he said, when you pick up a drink, do you set off that chain reaction, that phenomenon of craving? Two turns into four, four turns into eight, eight turns into 16. And I had to say yes. And then he said, do you experience the built-in forgetter? This idea of not being able to bring to your consciousness with sufficient force the memory and suffering. Yes, I wanted to put down alcohol and I couldn't, and I forgot about the pain and suffering and I did it. And finally, he said, I'm going to ask you the big question. Has anybody human been able to keep you clean and sober? Has a counselor, a therapist, a doctor, probation, your parents, your crying mother, a girlfriend, have you been able to keep yourself clean and sober? And I had to say no to all those things. And he said, well, Clearly, you don't have the power to stay clean and sober. Let's work on a power greater than you.
Mm.
I started the 12 steps not necessarily out of I wanted to do them, it was necessity. I knew that I had to do the 12 steps and I had to give it a shot. Somebody said to me, think of one, two, and three. I can't, he can, I think I'll let him. But it was explained to me that step one identifies the problem, two and three focuses on the solution, 4 through 9 teaches you the action of how to get the solution, and 10, 11, 12 teaches you how to keep the solution. I was finally ready to do it. I had to start over a couple times. I did experience a couple slips, relapses, but once I started to like really do the readings, work with the sponsor, have somebody identify and read these things through me, my life has gotten better. I mean, it's truly medicine. I look at my recovery program today, the meetings that I go to as medicine. Working the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous not only helped identify the problem and get the solution, but it just gave me so much more insight into why I do what I do as an alcoholic, why I think the way I think, why I behave and act the way that I act, and why my attitudes, are the way that they are, and that's what the sponsor did for me was able to allow me to have this spiritual awakening where now I can tap into a power greater than myself and be spiritually fit and be in a much better place to be happy, joyous, free, content, serene. Words that when I first got into AA were mythical to me. I don't know how people had serenity and peace of mind and ease and comfort without alcohol. And today, I work on spiritual fitness and I do that on a daily basis.
That is fantastic. And I see how you could continue talking about this, but we are a half hour variety hour. And so we got to move along. Folks, you can sign up to receive daily quotes at aagrapevine.org, and they'll be delivered to your email inbox, or you can read them every day in the Grapevine app. So, from the Sanity Clause, Shenandoah, Iowa, February of 1982, step by step. One night after a Step 2 meeting, I decided to find out what those courageous early members who put our 12 steps together really meant by sanity. I was a little surprised to find that my dictionary defined it as a quality of being sound of mind, sound of judgment, reasonable and rational in one's thoughts. As I sat there mulling over the definition, an idea occurred to me. This is what I'm being restored to. Sound, reasonable, rational thinking. Wow. That one really spoke to me. It spoke to someone else amongst the co-hosts here because two of us added it to the Daily Quotes document that we've been compiling. What does that mean to you, Chris, about being restored to sanity?
Yeah, that was such a tough part of step two when I first read that. Being restored to sanity. You couldn't convince me that I was insane. It was so hard to convince me that I was insane. It's, finally somebody, started to talk about the delusional thought process of picking up that first drink or that drug. And then they replaced the word delusional with a state of psychosis and then said that is a disconnect from reality. For me to think that I can pick up a drink in safety, I'm living in a disconnect from reality. And that's what helped me with the sanity word and recognizing that I do need to be restored to reality. The way I look at it now is if I get away from the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, I will start to look at life through the glasses of alcoholism.
Mm.
If I stay in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, I will look at life through recovery glasses, looking at life for in reality for what it is. If I get away from the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, even for just a handful of days, I start to see that insanity creep back up. And I needed people to show me, specifically a sponsor, but definitely having good relationships and home groups. I needed people to show me how much of a disconnect from reality I really had and how much of that delusional and psychosis that I was living in when I was trying to pick up that drink. So that's what helped me.
I'm like Chris. When I got here, I was 26 and, I just was going to figure it out. I was offended that you would tell me I was insane. Now, I was drunk. And I couldn't make good basic decisions, couldn't pay my bills, couldn't keep up. So this restoration to soundness, drunk or sober, I need. The reason that I'm still here 3+ decades later is because I can't trust my own thinking. The problem really centers in my mind, in my thinking, my point of view, the way that I see life, what you ought to do, how it ought to be. And, like Chris, I get anchored by the people around me that are sober, that are working the steps, that are in service. They help me even when they don't know it. They help me when they joke about themselves or they share a story. I need to be recovered through you. I can't be recovered on my own. It's really through other people that I can see that is not really what that meant. There's this guy, Bill C., who says, when people do things, it's not even personal. You're just in their blast radius. And I need to be reminded of that. So I love this restoration to sanity idea.
When I came into these rooms, I too was offended that you would imply that I was insane. Are you nuts? And that's what I thought insanity was quote unquote nuts. I was thinking, of people in straitjackets in asylums and, that's not me. I'm doing fine. I'm paying my bills mostly on time. I show up to work most of the time. My life was falling apart, and it was the denial that my drinking was making things a lot worse. I finally had to accept that the thing that makes me feel like this is the only thing that makes life worth living is actually destroying my life.
Yeah.
So it took a moment, and the people around me helped me so much in knowing how to live. I have a connection with a higher power, and that typically shows up in other people. Something that I proved to myself when I reset my date in 2012 after my last drink in 2003. I need people around me to frequently remind me of who I am and how I want to live.
Yeah.
Because if I try to do this on my own, if I try to do it my way, I will mess this up. And I've shown that to myself. I love that daily quote.
Sam, it's time for the Ask It Basket. We received a question from Victor in Tucson, Arizona. Victor writes, most groups I've attended welcome newcomers with readings from Chapter 5 of the Big Book. Where, how, or why did this idea originate?
Yeah, thank you, Victor, for that. We reached out to AA World Services, the General Service Office, and this is the response they gave us. We have edited it a little bit. So how it works was commonly referred to as a preamble from Chapter 5 in the Big Book and had been read at the start of meetings as early as the 1950s. In 1954, the conference approved the opening of the first business session with the reading of the preamble. An advisory action from 1954 reads, the first business session of the conference opened with a reading of the preamble from Chapter 5 of the Big Book, together with the 12 suggested steps and 12 traditions. There's also a personal letter from Ann M., one of the AA secretaries on the GSO staff, that's General Service Office, who worked at GSO headquarters in the 1950s. It was addressed to Secretary, P.O. Box 2047, Cape Town, South Africa. And it reads in part, you asked about a preamble. It is the custom in quite a number of groups, particularly those in California, to read the first part of Chapter 5 in the Big Book Alcoholics Anonymous as a preamble. Under the heading of How It Works, it starts, rarely have we seen a person fail, and goes on through, we claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection on page 72.
I appreciate as a spiritual society, we continue to invest in an infrastructure that allows us to ask these kinds of questions and get an answer. That we have an archive, that we preserve and protect our history so that people can ask questions like, why are we reading that? Why in the beginning of a meeting are we in Chapter 5 when we're telling people to start at the dust cover? And so I really want to just acknowledge and appreciate that it's only through our seventh tradition contributions that we're able to have this resource. So I want to say that. When I was brand new, and we would read How It Works, and it would say, but there is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find him now. It touched me so deeply, like I would cry, because it offered me a kind of hope that I was desperate for, that there was really an answer. So I don't know that we still can tell Victor like why, but I do appreciate that we have some history.
Chris, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure getting to chat with you.
It's been really lovely. You're on fire for Alcoholics Anonymous, and so thank you for being a light.
Appreciate it. Thank you guys for the opportunity. I have so much gratitude to be able to do something like this.
The Grapevine strives to be self-supporting.
Please subscribe to the magazine or app and visit the Grapevine online store.
The app is free in your phone's app store and has great content and features provided at no cost to you.
But if you subscribe, you get so much more. And you support all things Grapevine, including this podcast.
Oh, yeah.
Only $2.99 a month.
When the Hulk goes into an uncontrollable fit of rage, he's called incredible.
The Incredible Hulk Smash!
But when I do it, I'm just an alcoholic.
It's really not that funny.
Thanks for joining us. The AA Grapevine Half-Hour Variety Hour is posted every Monday and is produced by AA Grapevine, Inc. We don't speak for AA as a whole. We share the experience, strength, and hope of members to help others recover from alcoholism. All things Grapevine are available at aagrapevine.org, including our app and how to get in touch with us. Find us on Instagram and YouTube. If you want to know more about AA, visit aa.org or search online for Alcoholics Anonymous and your city.